this is the Next Generation film that I have the least to say about, as it's generally considered to be a weaker entry into the series anyway. Many reviewers have commented on the flaws of this film, and as those views don't differ tremendously from my own, I don't think I really have much to add to this issue. Star Trek Insurrection is a bad film, but after watching it again, I don't really see it as a slap-in-the-face insult anymore. I see this as a well-intentioned movie that just made a lot of really serious mistakes. The first and biggest of which is that it takes a conflict similar to a very well-known TNG episode, but has the crew taking the opposite side of this case. The TNG films were not like the original films, in the sense that those were standalone and did not require anyone to be familiar with the series. These films were really just extensions of the series itself, and with the possible exception of First Contact, the only people who were going to see these movies were Next Generation fans anyway. So when the audience hears about a plot revolving around a planet of settlers being forced to relocate, everyone is going to be thinking about this episode, and considering that the crew basically turns its back on the very decisions and principles they upheld in that episode, it almost automatically makes them all hypocrites. Not a great way to start the film. But there's a bigger issue here. The problem of that false conflict I mentioned in First Contact, except here, everything about this film hinges on a false conflict. The situation is that a race known as the Baku created technologies that destroyed or were in the process of destroying their civilization, so a handful of them set out to find a new home, and they found this planet. A planet that causes perpetual youth. There's a bunch of meta-whatever radiation in the planet's rings that keeps them youthful and healthy. It's on this planet that they swore off all technology and lived like Mennonites, but oh look, they're so happy and peaceful. They really like it here. But some were not so happy. They apparently wanted to do something with their lives other than, stagnate. So they wanted to reintroduce technologies and the like into society. Well, the leaders of this planet couldn't have that, so they said, get the hell off this planet that isn't ours and that you have just as much right to be on as we do. Well, it's a few hundred years later now, and those expelled people have come back to kick them off the planet and harvest the metaphasic whatevers so that everyone can have long-lasting life, and the Federation is helping with this because the planet is in their space and they want the meta-whatevers too. Now, in any other time in the series, it's clear what side the Enterprise crew would be on. And even if they did take the Baku's side, it wouldn't be just because they like them more. They would have had some kind of intellectual debate about this situation that would have been so complicated it would have encompassed the entire hour of the episode. But the crew almost automatically sides with the Baku because, well, look how happy and humble they are. They're so much better than us. Let's just let them stay here, you guys, okay? As it's been said numerous times, the problem with Insurrection is just how damned narrow it is. The Baku are in the right, and everyone who wants to take them away from the planet is in the wrong. Rather than look at this as a difficult or even thought-requiring situation, the plot simply tells us what the conflict and resolution is and demand that we never question this. Pay no attention to those life-hoarding assholes behind the curtain. Oh, and there's that terrible line about how when you build a machine to do the work of a man, you take something away from the man. If you haven't already seen it yet, please pause this review and go watch SF Debris' review of this film. What he says about that line in particular is $1 million worth of truth. Now, everything that has been said about the Baku is true. They have no right to hoard all of this life just for 600 people. The planet is and never was theirs to begin with. But there's one issue about the Baku that has almost never been mentioned that I personally find nauseating about them. The Baku are cowards. Look at the Earth in its darkest days in the Star Trek universe. We too had a war that destroyed our civilization, but humanity learned to evolve past that sort of thing and to use technology for good and prosperity, knowing that it's never going to be perfect and that technology is always going to have the risk for bad, but that potential is a part of life and it's a danger we have to face instead of hiding from it. That way we also have the potential to create more good than bad from this. The Baku had a similar conflict, and while it's not clear if there was a war or just the precursors to one, after they found this place, they basically said, you know what, we can't possibly handle technology responsibly. We just don't have it in us, so we're just gonna get rid of it. We'll live like it's 1,000 years ago, and anyone who doesn't want to do this is a danger to the colony and will be expelled from this planet that we don't even own. That is cowardice. The Baku are hiding. This has nothing to do with wanting to hold on to their culture or their society, because that doesn't have anything to do with the planet. They're staying here because they're afraid. But the worst part in all this is that, once again, their we use no technology, we live like it's the 18th century, and anyone who doesn't want to do this can fuck off and die lifestyle has nothing to do with the eternal youth and metaphasic whatever part of this issue. The Baku want to live like Luddites who are stuck in the past and too afraid to move on from it? Fine. They can do that just as easily somewhere else. To say otherwise is to say that they really do just want to hoard all the magic youth radiation for themselves, which clearly makes them in the wrong. The fundamental problems with this false conflict seem to be so obvious in retrospect, and it's even been talked about by the film's writers and cast. So the thing that really piques my curiosity is why no one thought about this during the writing process in the first place. I'm not claiming to know what's going on in anyone's mind or in their heart, but I suspect that Michael Piller, who came up with the story, just honestly wanted to tell this story, and he became so caught up in getting that story across that the self-defeating details weren't as important to him. After all, if a story is good enough, people can ignore the details, right? This is why I can recognize this is a bad movie, but it doesn't make me hate it anymore. I think Pillar's intentions were genuinely good here. He wanted to tell a story that was closer to the spirit of Star Trek than the films had done before. So at least his heart was in the right place, and there was definitely the seeds of a good movie in there somewhere. He just didn't think it through. The whole film just feels so false and manipulative that it's really hard to give it any credit, even with that in mind. But like I said, all this has been said before, and I don't really have any more to add to the issue other than that. As far as the characters go, there still isn't much to say about them. The love story between Picard and Anij is putrid and just as false and artificial as the film itself. And what they do with Data is once again insulting and doesn't develop the character at all. Have you ever noticed that something is always wrong with Data in these films? In Generations, his emotion chip malfunctioned, in First Contact he fucked a Borg, and in this film they go right into another malfunction. They can't just ever let Data be Data. Why does something always have to be wrong with him? Oh, and one last word to the people who wrote this movie. Guys, please. It was insulting enough to see Data act like Robin Williams. It was insulting enough to watch Data have an orgasm. But please, don't make Data the equivalent of a child. It's demeaning. What the hell are you guys doing? Honestly, I don't have any more to say about this film. It was just one big honest mistake in my opinion. Better than Generations, but not as good as First Contact. Was it better or worse than Nemesis? We'll see.